that is squeezing them even more.
When you think about the ongoing capital needs of we need a new MRI or we need a new building, obviously that raises the cost that the health system is going to have to pay for that.
How hospitals deal with tightening financial conditions. That's next on Marketplace. More All Things Considered at 7 o'clock.
WNYC supporters include New Jersey Symphony, presenting Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back in concert. The symphony plays John Williams' score live while the film is projected on screen. May 18th to the 21st in 4 New Jersey venues. Tickets at njsymphony.org.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance. The Name Your Price tool provides a range of coverage options. Progressive.com. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Just a heads up, this is going to be a very busy summer. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by SlashNext, generative human AI security that stops business email compromise and mobile phishing scams. Businesses can compare SlashNext with their current solutions for 30 days at slashnext.com. And by vBrick. vBrick unlocks the power of video for customers' business processes. vbrick.com/marketplace to learn more.
In Portland, Oregon, I'm Rima Jerez in for Kai Rizdal. It is Monday, May 8th. Good to have you along. So officially, summer travel season is less than 3 weeks away. And if you're like me and haven't booked your vacation plans yet, well, we should get on that. But also, this first story might help. United Airlines is predicting bookings for Memorial Day weekend will run 12% higher than last year. That's also slightly above what they were before the pandemic, back in 2019. Meanwhile, Delta execs on their most recent quarterly earnings call said that 3/4 of the seats on international flights for the summer are already booked. And that, I should remind you, was a few weeks ago. So what does this all mean for airlines? Here is Marketplace's Samantha Fields.
Summer is always one of the busiest times of the year for air travel.
It's right up there with some of the other busier travel seasons like Thanksgiving and Christmas.
And Andrew Perini, the chief commercial officer at Tulsa International Airport, says it lasts a whole lot longer.
A couple months of demand versus those 1 or 2 weeks out of the year.
Last summer, airlines were not prepared for just how desperate people were to travel. Most didn't have nearly enough staff to meet the huge demand. So, to get ready for this year, Mike Stengel at Aerodynamic Advisory says airlines have been hiring for all kinds of positions.
Flight attendants, pilots, your airport workers that are employed by the airlines, the ground staff, all your reservation agents that you talk to on the phone when you're booking tickets.
And now, heading into this summer travel season,
when you look at U.S. airlines, their total employment is actually above pre-COVID levels.
Even so, airlines are still actively looking to hire for pretty much all positions. Henry Hardevelt at Atmosphere Research Group says one in particular.
They would like to get even more pilots in place to operate the aircraft they have and the aircraft they expect to have, and to account for pilots who are retiring.
United says it hired more pilots last year than ever before, more than 2,300. But it still needs more, along with more technicians, more flight attendants, more reservation and gate agents, and all sorts of corporate jobs. So do most airlines, Hardevelt says.
There's probably never been a better time to start an airline career. Salaries are up, hourly wages are up, benefits are better.
And he says a lot of these jobs have the potential to turn into good long-term careers. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
Okay, so we're going to keep this transportation beat going with now a look at shipping. So much in our economy has been turned upside down, including the paths so many of our goods travel as they cross the globe. And with that, the ports at which they arrive in this country have changed too. Remember when there was a line 100 ships long to get into the port of Los Angeles? Well, there is no backup now. Container volumes at West Coast ports have fallen 10% compared to before the pandemic. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore has that.
That logjam of ships during the pandemic, it left a mark. Chris Jones is with Descartes Systems, a supply chain and logistics tech company. He compared shipping volume in the first 3 months of 2019 to the first 3 months of this year and calculates that by the end of this year,
1 million TEUs moved out of the West Coast ports and into the Gulf and East Coast ports.
TEUs are a way of measuring trade volume. Basically, 1 TEU is half of one of those giant shipping containers you see on boats. Point is, hundreds of thousands of those containers are now coming to ports like Houston and New York instead of ports like LA or Seattle.
What happened was the East Coast ports rose about 3%, but the Gulf Coast ports went up 43%.
This big shift isn't all just the pandemic. Labor disputes on the West Coast have frightened shippers and retailers. They're worried that a strike might break supply chains all over again. But this shift away from the West Coast was actually happening even before all of that. Nereus Poskous is with Flexport.
U.S. West Coast had roughly 50% of market share for all U.S. imports back in 2016-17, and it has been dropping ever since steadily.
The West Coast's market share is now 42%, he says. Over time, global manufacturing has changed, and so, therefore, have shipping routes.
A lot of manufacturing has been shifting from China to Southeast Asia to Indian subcontinent, as well as somewhat Latin America.
So even if supply chain problems are gone now, and let's say labor disputes resolve, would those containers go back west? Jessica Dankert is with the Retail Industry Leaders Association.
So many of the networks have been put in place and we've made these kind of changes. I don't know that we'll see that same level of, return volume to the West Coast.
She says a lot of retailers are still rethinking their routes. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, it was kind of a meh day. Maybe they were waiting for the debt ceiling meeting tomorrow at the White House. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. For hospitals across the country, it is getting more expensive to keep their doors open. That's in part thanks to rising interest rates. The Fed recently approved its 10th rate increase in a little more than a year. And those hikes, they are taking a particular toll on small and mid-sized cash-strapped hospitals. Marketplace's Elizabeth Troval explains.
In hospitals across the country, the price of doing business is up. Kritika Amin is with health policy nonprofit KFF.
Wages and labor pressures are increasing in hospitals unless they're able to find ways to cut back on staff or cut other expenses.
John Budd has heard a lot about increased operational costs. He's with ECG Management Consultants and helps rural hospitals manage their budgets.
Even medical supplies are up about 13% when you look at where they were last year.
That's one squeeze on hospitals. Another, as the Fed increases interest rates, so goes the cost of borrowing money.
When you think about the ongoing capital needs of we need a new MRI or we need a new building or we need, some type of replacement or expansion, obviously that raises the cost that the health system is going to have to pay for that.
This hurts some hospitals more than others. Vivian Ho is an economist with Rice University.
Larger ones, they have plenty of cash reserves to build whatever they want.
But for smaller and rural hospitals that have to borrow to cover expenses or expand,
the higher interest rates are going to be very difficult for them to manage.
Also, it's harder to hire in rural areas, and these hospitals often serve an aging, less healthy population with more folks on Medicaid or Medicare, which is less lucrative for hospitals. And John Budd says when you throw in higher interest rates,
they're going to see an acceleration of cash burn. And, we're seeing that in our client base right now. And for many of those, that means even in some instances, risking closure.
So, while well-resourced hospitals can outlast higher interest rates, Budd says some smaller hospitals may not have the time to wait it out. I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
When you think of braces, I think it's fair to say that some of the images that come to mind might include angsty teenagers, acne, maybe some bad haircuts. But the thing is, more and more adults are the ones getting braces. According to a trade group survey, the number of adults in this country getting orthodontic treatment has shot up by 43% over the last decade. Laura Benshoff reports.
Philadelphia mom Sophie Young has this cautionary tale for anyone with a retainer collecting dust somewhere.
After not wearing retainers for about 30 years, I couldn't close my mouth. What? So when I closed my mouth like this, you saw my tooth sticking out.
She had braces in her early teens, but over time her front tooth started poking out again. So a couple of years ago, when her kids got to the age where they needed braces, she figured why not fix it again.
Are you wearing a retainer now? On and off. Hopefully my children have better discipline. And my husband's coming back to get his bottom teeth straightened out again, too.
Nearly a third of patients getting orthodontic treatment in the U.S. and Canada are now adults, according to a member survey by the American Association of Orthodontists. Some practices even see a majority of adult clients, like Greco Orthodontics in Philadelphia. There are private rooms, dad rock on the speakers, understated decor. Today, Dr. Peter Greco is leaning over a patient named Liz Mack, who's on her back in the chair. He tells her he wants to adjust some of her teeth, but not others.
Sort of like an orchestra playing. You want the trumpets to play only at the right time, and not when the trombones are playing, that kind of thing.
Right. Greco says he's seeing more patients who want younger-looking smiles.
I think part of that has to do with the fact that baby boomers are aging and they don't like to age.
His daughter and fellow orthodontist, Dr. Alexandra Greco, says it's not just boomers.
The younger adults definitely have increased a lot. I think with social media, a lot of people are looking at themselves, and with the pandemic, Zoom was a huge boom for us.
Aesthetics are the leading reason adults get braces, according to a couple of recent surveys. But Dr. Dale-Ann Featheringham, trustee at the American Association of Orthodontists, says there are also functional reasons for getting braces later in life.
A bad bite that's causing them to wear their teeth down in certain places, and then teeth that are really crowded and hard to clean.
For image-conscious adults, clear aligners have also changed the game. Those are clear plastic trays that straighten your teeth. Featheringham says that technology really took off about a decade ago.
It started to hit the tipping point that adults started to see other adults doing Invisalign treatment or doing treatment with some kind of clear aligners.
Invisalign is available through a doctor's office, but newer companies are selling braces directly to consumers. That practice has drawn some controversy and lawsuits. But Featheringham credits the enormous marketing budgets of companies like Smile Direct Club and Bite with bringing more interest to adult braces in general.
That did drive business into our offices because we were oftentimes the trusted source in the community for that.
For people like Sarah Bishop Stone, a 41-year-old who works in the arts in Philadelphia, aligners were the obvious choice.
I just, at this point in my adult life, couldn't psychically go back to having braces.
Bishop Stone didn't initially want to fix her teeth again, but she had a lower tooth that was receding, and her dentist warned her that if she didn't treat it, it might change her face shape over time.
The idea of the toothless crone with her face caved in really put the fear in me.
She says the few $1,000s she paid in installments were worth it to keep that image of herself at bay. I'm Laura Benshoff for Marketplace.
By the way, this piece, it reminds me of an episode we had on the Marketplace podcast that I host called This is Uncomfortable. It's a story about how one woman's smile became a marker of poverty. The episode is called Why Don't You Fix Your Teeth? If you want to check that out, wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up,
get it there, make sure mom gets her chocolate.
You heard her. Mom needs her chocolate. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones dropped 55 points, 0.2% to close at 33,618. The Nasdaq gained 21 points, 0.2% to finish at 12,256. And the S&P 500 was nearly flat with an increase of 1 point, less than 0.1% to end at 4138. Samantha was just telling us about the busy summer travel season ahead. United Airlines flew up 2 0.3%. Delta also increased 0.8%. Meanwhile, Southwest landed down 0.2%. A report out today from the Vote Mama Foundation breaks down the number of parents that represent Americans in Congress. Just 6.8% of U.S. congressional representatives are moms with children under 18. Meanwhile, dads with minor children make up 24.2% of Congress. Bonds fell. The yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 3.52%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by DTN, with operational intelligence designed to eliminate decision dead zones, improve efficiency, and help mitigate risks as the global business landscape shifts. Learn more at dtn.com/OI. And by Domo, the data experience platform innovator that unites IT's need for governance and business users' need for access. With Domo, companies get agile data experiences that spark the curiosity that underpins business impact. More at domo.com. And by Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business helps simplify the supplies buying process. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
Support for WNYC comes from the Central Park Conservancy, who maintains 843 acres that need constant care. More information on how to help keep the park a thriving green space for all New Yorkers at centralparknyc.org.
New Yorkers are always juggling work, family, sleep, so it can be tough to keep up with the news. That's why there's NYC Now, a local news podcast from WNYC. With 3 quick updates a day, you'll get breaking news, the big story of the day, in-depth reporting, and what it all means for you. Listen to NYC Now, weekdays wherever you get podcasts.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. In the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, more details are emerging about the shooter who killed 8 people in a Texas mall on Saturday as families and the community mourn the victims. Well, that and much more at 7 o'clock. Stay with us.
This is Marketplace. I'm Rima Reis. More states are moving to restrict the rights of transgender youth, namely their access to transition-related health care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapy. 18 states have now enacted laws or policies banning gender-affirming care for minors, though courts have blocked some of them. But with more states considering these bans, that means more families who support their kids' gender identities are faced with a difficult and expensive decision: stay and fight back, or uproot their lives and move to a more welcoming state. A year ago, Marketplace's Amy Scott spoke with several families in Texas who were weighing that choice. And recently, she caught up with 2 of them to see how they're doing now.
When I first talked to Karen in Austin last March, Texas Governor Greg Abbott had ordered the state's child welfare agency to investigate parents for abuse if they help trans kids access gender-affirming medical care. Karen and her husband, both lifelong Texans, have a transgender daughter who was still too young for medical interventions, but they wanted her to have that choice and were terrified they could be separated from both of their kids.
I just said, I don't want to go into some small room for my supervised visit with my children where I explain we could have left, but we were too late.
So last June, the family packed up their house, put it on the market, and drove 2,000 miles to Portland, Oregon. They happened to arrive during the city's Pride Festival.
We drove through this sea of rainbows. It was unbelievable. I mean, what a welcome.
It feels great here.
That's Karen's daughter. We're calling her O to protect her privacy.
I mean, it was hard to leave my friends because I liked them so much, but I knew that it would be a much better place here in Oregon and much safer for me.
O is 11 now and in 5th grade. She has long brown hair and a sweet smile, and she seems to be settling right into her new home.
I like the scenery a lot, like the nature. It's like very green and all the trees are like massive and it's really cool. Yeah.
She plays ultimate frisbee and loves to draw and is really into the Japanese manga series Demon Slayer. She even learned to play the theme music on cello, which she was happy to demonstrate on Zoom. Karen and her husband were lucky they could both keep their jobs and work remotely, but moving hasn't solved the larger issue. The onslaught of legislation targeting trans kids' rights to play sports, to use the bathroom, to choose their pronouns at school shows no sign of slowing down.
I do feel safer, with that R in parentheses, but I don't feel safe. And I worry about what I've seen in Texas, and I worry that people don't think it can happen here.
She also feels a lot of guilt for leaving behind those who are still fighting for trans rights in Texas. One of them is Ed in San Antonio.
We're still here. We haven't moved.
Ed also has deep roots in Texas. He and his wife both own businesses that employ a lot of people. They share custody of Ed's transgender daughter, Charlie, with Ed's ex-wife. So moving would be challenging. Plus, Charlie loves her school. She's 11 and has started puberty blockers. When we talked, the governor's child abuse order was tied up in the courts, but the Texas Senate had just passed a bill banning such care for all minors in the state, and the House was weighing a companion bill.
Like a lot of the parents, we're all pretty scared, because if they make her care against the law, what choice do we have but to move, and I don't really want to move, it'd be really difficult.
Proponents of these bans say they're trying to protect children from interventions they might later regret. Recent studies have found that those regrets are rare, and numerous studies have shown that transgender and non-binary youth who receive gender-affirming care and family support have lower rates of depression, substance abuse, and suicide risk. Major medical groups, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, support the use of puberty blockers and hormone therapy for trans youth when developmentally appropriate. When Charlie first told her parents she was a girl at age 4, Ed says,
I didn't know anything about it. And we hired professionals. We watched as her life became more joyful, the more support she got. And so, there's kind of no going back at this point.
And he worries about transgender youth who don't have family support. If everyone else leaves, he says, who would fight for them? I'm Amy Scott for Marketplace.
It is not easy being a small business retailer in this economy, especially over the last few months with folks hitting pause on some of their buying. We saw that in the most recent retail sales numbers, 2 months in a row of lower consumer spending. So, what's a store owner to do? Well, sometimes the calendar helps. Kristen Thalheimer Bingham runs a chocolate shop in Portland, Maine called Dean's Sweets, and she sent us this dispatch.
Mother's Day is coming up quickly, and we are currently both prepping for the day and at the same time already seeing business from it. One of the funny things about Mother's Day is that as we approach the day, we start to get more and more sort of panicky phone calls from customers who, for whatever reason, have put off sending chocolate or who may have possibly forgotten the holiday. And so they call with this extra little bit of angst in their voice. So as always, we do our best to get the orders out as quickly as possible and get it there, make sure mom gets her chocolate. We are so fortunate that we have a full team right now. There's definitely a labor shortage in Portland and elsewhere because I know the restaurants and hotels in the area are worried about getting enough seasonal staff. We take quite a bit of care to do everything we can to keep our amazing team together, including raising wages, supporting them with health insurance, giving our staff paid time off. And what I think makes a big difference for us is that although our business has a lot of seasonality to it, we make every effort to keep our folks working in the slower times, too, so that we can rely on them in the busy season. It works out for them and it works out for us incredibly well. Our biggest challenge right now feels a little amorphous, but it feels like this sort of ever-present awareness that we need to keep doing new, fun, interesting things with our chocolate business, and add to that some degree of worry about inflation or possible recession, which of course we have no control over. But it just adds up to this challenging feeling that it never really lets up.
That's Kristen Thalheimer Bingham, owner of Dean's Sweets over in Portland, Maine. This final note on the way out today. We started the show talking about airlines gearing up for a busy summer. Meanwhile, the Biden administration announced today that it is working on new regulations for airlines. These regulations would compensate passengers beyond a ticket refund and cover their meals and their hotel rooms if they're stranded because of something that was within the airline's control. This comes after all the chaos that ensued last winter with flight disruptions. Right now, no major U.S. airline guarantees cash compensation for delays or cancellations. It's not clear when or if the Transportation Department will publish these final rules, but safe to say they will not be ready for this busy summer.
Marketplace is supported by the United States Postal Service, offering postage stamps for purchase at more than 40,000 supermarkets, drugstores, office suppliers, and wholesale clubs. And by Raymond James, tailored wealth management, banking, and capital market solutions for clients' unique needs. Learn more at raymondjames.com.
Okay, before we go, here is your moment of economic context. It is about the humble, everlasting pantry staple known as instant ramen. Saw an article in Quartz about how the Japanese company behind cup noodles saw a 32% year-over-year jump in the U.S. in 2022. Generally, there is an upward trend in the instant ramen market, especially as inflation hikes up our grocery bills, which, by the way, we are going to get another inflation reading later this week on Wednesday. All right, our daily production team includes Livy Burdett, Andy Corbin, Richard Cunningham, Nicholas Guillong, Maria Hollenhorst, Sarah Leeson, and Sean McHenry. And I'm Marie Majerez. We'll be back tomorrow. This is APM.
WNYC is supported by